on a very exciting topic of insurance, but probably more so now we're sort of starting to evolve in that space where cyber insurance and those associated liabilities were a couple of years ago to now sort of looking towards AI and how that's going to be managed correctly within corporate Australia, and how directors and those professionals that obviously are using the likes of AI are going to be able to use that correctly and safely at the same time. So the presentation today is really just touching on that, and whilst it's not at a point yet in the insurance market of having a definitive outcome on insurance policies, and we're talking general insurance here for the corporate world, but not necessarily having that scope of clauses or typical exclusions that associate around AI yet. But certainly insurers aren't oblivious to this, particularly professional advice firms that we're dealing with here at Hone Insurance Group, and now starting to scrutinise that a little bit closer to understand how AI is being used within professional services firms. And if you are using it, what type of risk management controls do you have around that? So if I'm in my presentation here, sorry, I am not the most technical savvy. So I thought I'd just give you a quick overview just of what directors and officers insurance is and what professional indemnity insurance is. I'm sure you're all familiar with the terms, and perhaps you are familiar with both these insurance policies. But ultimately, directors and officers insurance is a vital coverage designed to protect the personal assets and liability exposures of company directors and officers. And in this dynamic world of business where decisions can lead to legal actions, the likes of D&O insurance steps in. The policy is designed to shield these key individuals from financial risks arising from claims related to alleged wrongful acts, such as breaches of fiduciary duties, mismanagement, errors in judgment, and other managerial decisions. Professional indemnity. So those that perform professional advice for a fee will have a form of professional indemnity insurance. And professional indemnity insurance, often known as PI insurance, serves as a safeguard for professionals and businesses like D&O against the financial risks arising from claims made by clients or third parties due to errors, negligence, omissions, or breaches of professional duties. The insurance coverage provides assistance covering legal expenses incurred in defending against such claims, as well as potential damages and compensation that may be awarded to the claimant if the professional is found to be at fault. So let's dive into a little bit more about what we're seeing in the market at the moment and what to expect over the coming years from our perspective. Yeah. So how will directors, now some of you may be directors, or some of you obviously may have clients that are directors, and you know, this is obviously going to be extremely topical, and you've probably seen more so in the media recently, more so on cyber liabilities and some really noteworthy cases around those breaches and how the governance of those companies have been scrutinised around cyber hygiene. We're now going to start to look at applying same parallels around the AI models that are being used. So similar to concerns around cyber liability and ESG governance recently, AI will play a parallel role in introducing a new set of considerations for directors and boards. Now, cyber risks over the past 5 years, as I said, has prompted the need for robust cybersecurity measures. And AI introduces risks related to bias algorithms, data privacy breaches, and unintended consequences. So directors and boards must proactively start to identify and manage these risks, implementing measures to mitigate potential negative outcomes stemming from AI technologies. Now, directors have needed to continue educating themselves about cyber threats and defences, and we now need to gain a solid understanding of AI's capabilities, limitations, and implications. Boards may even consider appointing directors with AI expertise, or establishing mechanisms for ongoing AI education to continue start making those informed decisions. And as we have recently witnessed, cyber liability led to compliance with data protection laws, and now directors and boards must navigate evolving AI-related regulations to ensure the company's AI practices comply with newly formed legal requirements. So, What are the legal and insurance policy implications that we're seeing by using ChatGPT? But when we explore this category, utilising ChatGPT and similar AI language models does carry multifaceted legal implications, as I'm sure you're all aware. These encompass concerns such as intellectual property infringement, potential defamation through false AI-generated content, privacy violations to data use, and adherence to contractual obligations. Industries with specific regulations, we're talking finance, healthcare, need to really ensure that AI-generated advice complies with industry standards. So moreover, misaligned AI outputs might trigger contractual disputes. So this is where insurers are starting to really sort of hone in on. The risk of unintended harm or misinformation resulting from AI-generated content and the issue of consumer protection in advising and marketing further underlines legal challenges. Now, I am an insurance broker, so I am not a registered lawyer, so please take this as general advice. But this is what we're seeing. Bias and discrimination in AI outputs may lead to those legal actions, and obviously navigating the accountability for AI content can prove intricate. As the AI legal landscape evolves, seeking legal guidance becomes paramount to comprehend and mitigate potential risks, considering the ever-changing regulations across different jurisdictions. So those implications for the likes of ChatGPT will vary, and obviously I'm focusing on ChatGPT because this is something that we're seeing throughout a lot of our clients and a lot of our legal clients as well. Will vary depending on how it is used. For example, the data that is requested or inputted and the context of its use, which I'm sure many of you understand. Now, overall, whilst there is a broad range of circumstances, some possible legal implications could draw liability concerns for any harm or damages that arise from its use, such as incorrect information being input, inappropriate advice, or content that's provided. Now, this is an important piece to take away, as not having these controls embedded within your practice may serve you inconsistencies and possible client suits. Now, if we cross over to the insurance policy implications, as I said before and earlier in this talk, there aren't any sort of specific clauses or exclusions that are singling out AI just yet, but the topic of conversation is there with client renewal meetings. So it's something yet which obviously isn't defined by insurers, but an item that we are constantly hearing from these underwriters and addressing concerns. More so probably on professional liability is certainly going to be brought into question in the future, just like cyber liability was a few years ago. If ChatGPT is used in a professional context, which we all are starting to explore those opportunities, such as providing legal, financial, insurance broking or medical advice, professional indemnity insurance will be necessary to protect against those claims of negligence, malpractice or misleading information to which third parties are relying on you to give accurate advice on. Now, currently given advice-based firms are now starting to use this more frequently, that is ChatGPT or the likes of other AI generative tools, insurers are likely going to start to take note of how ChatGPT, I'm using that as an example, is being used in your wider industry and how that is being mitigated and or risk controls internally from the top down. That might be peer reviewing, and we can get into that a little bit later. I mean, the bigger problem for insurers is what we're hearing at the moment is what happens if a firm of 500 lawyers start using ChatGPT to speed up its research. We're asking the question, is your PI insurance adequate? Is the limit high enough? You've got an added exposure of risk that you don't necessarily have control over, which is new. Now, insurers have taken steps to limit the potential fallout from generative AI used poorly by asking numerous questions in these renewal meetings which fall outside your typical duty of disclosure when you're going through that cycle. We need to bring to light a larger concern for insurers. What happens when powerful generative AI, such as ChatGPT, is integrated into a professional service firm, such as law firms' operations? We raise an important question. Are firms adequately insured against the increased exposures to risks stemming from AI-generated content? The potential usage of AI to expedite research could inadvertently lead to incorrect information being distributed. Now, insurers are not oblivious to this challenge and as I said before, have already begun taking steps to mitigate that potential fallout from the misapplication of generative AI being used, and more so being used in reporting to clientele. As I said before, I have recently attended a few client meetings between major insurers and their underwriters, and a few of my clients that are top-tier law firms in Australia. Now, this meeting revolved around devising policies and procedures for risk committees to ensure the responsible and secure use of generative AI. A few of them had loose plans around that, and others actually had more robust plans around how they're using that. It could actually go through a chart of how they go step by step and how they're actually using these work through programs for their staff to effectively use AI, and how they're limited to the use of what they're using it for. So with that, insurers are keen to comprehend the safeguards in place to prevent errors or fraudulent activities arising from AI-generated content. However, without proper risk managed disclosure documentation, it is very hard for insurers to pinpoint what is great and what is good practice management. And this is what we saw with cyber liability about 2 or 3 years ago. So now we are drawing parallels around cybersecurity as a major boardroom issue, as is AI now. So just as many companies initially paid insufficient attention to cybersecurity, they now face a similar challenge with AI, and we're wanting to try and advocate that earlier, as obviously we'd like to be more proactive than reactive and get companies in a better position to be able to not only obviously get better risk transfer results through insurance, but obviously help better protect them internally around how they're utilising this tool. So we predict that generative AI's journey will follow a similar path of gradual education, regulation, and compliance. Now, this evolution from a lack of awareness to vigilant adherence to best practices is a pattern that history has shown us, particularly in the insurance industry. And ultimately, the interplay between the evolving landscape of technology and the insurance industry is actually quite fascinating, and it underscores the importance of adopting these new challenges. The complexities of insuring professional indemnity coverage in an era of generative AI demand careful consideration of intent, policy, and procedure. Now, that goes for anyone who's providing financial advice, professional advice for a fee, and all those firms that are starting to use that AI tool. Now, insurance policy implications, we've touched on professional indemnity and how that needs to be ring-fenced from a risk management perspective when you're using AI. Cyber liability does cross over. It is obviously a potential issue that could arise out of AI. Now, depending on the intended use and the nature of the data it handles, robust cyber risk management alongside your AI risk management is that inadequate insurance programs may be required to protect against potential data breaches or cyber attacks. The use of ChatGPT and the likes of other AI generative tools also creates several ethical concerns that we've picked up on for professionals. One being duty to the client. Professional advice-based firms, lawyers, accountants, insurance broking are required to act in the best interests of their client. Now, using ChatGPT and other tools like it without verifying the veracity or the quality of its output may amount to negligent conduct on the part of the practitioner. So as we move forward, we need to remember the lessons from the past, i.e. cyber liabilities, and work to embrace and harness the potential of AI while safeguarding it against its unintended consequences. Now, a really good example, just to wrap that up in this particular segment, is hallucination, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Making up content. So when you're using the likes of ChatGPT, we have seen a couple of examples out of the US where hallucinations have occurred. Fabricating facts and sources where it does not have access to sufficient data. So this tendency is particularly problematic as ChatGPT, for example, will not indicate where it has fabricated information and will display the same level of confidence when providing a factually correct answer. Therefore, professionals will need to exercise significant quality control over all the likes of ChatGPT output when they use it. Now, this may be similar across other AI generative tools, but we're talking about ChatGPT. This has been a focus for us. There was a case out of the US where a lawyer did make a few references through ChatGPT to clients that were actually false, completely false. So they were referencing false made-up cases, which didn't end well. So we'll move on to the next slide here. How can the use of ChatGPT put businesses at risk of copyright? Obviously, segueing into this, and I won't touch too much on this part because I'm sure it's quite obvious. The terms and conditions really vary, obviously, here from tool to tool, and how you use those materials is really going to dictate whether copyright breaches are going to be more so there or not. So ultimately, we really need to consider if clients or consumers were to discover you are simply passing along AI-generated information, what's to stop them from doing the same and cutting the middle person out entirely, which then draws in the reputational damage. Now, that's a big one. Cyber liability claims recently all of them have been monsters, but the really long tail nature of these claims is the reputational damage that it does to the firm and the individuals. So that's something that we all need to consider, and copyright's a big one. So, what type of information, how much do you need to muddle with it before it's actually not classified as copyright? And how do you actually determine if it is or not, particularly ChatGPT? Again, that's the one we're looking at. Are businesses covered? This is one that we're asked all the time around AI, and is it covered? So, as I mentioned earlier in this discussion, was the adequacy of businesses taking out the likes of professional indemnity insurance if you're providing advice for a fee. This highlights, again, the limits that you are purchasing, and the broadness of those conditions within a policy is paramount. To be able to understand what you're actually covered for is obviously something that you guys and everyone who has a policy needs to really go through and understand themselves. Now, at this important time, we have not witnessed declinatures in incidents that utilise AI for professional work, but do foresee incidents occurring in the future, which might bring this topic into question. So would your PI policy respond? It really depends on the nature of the claim, the contract of the work, and the policy it is written on. But generally speaking, a policy of this nature would likely respond for now. I know that's a little bit aloof, but obviously when we're talking about potential claims through the use of AI, it is on a case-by-case basis, and really we need to understand whether the individual who used the content from AI knew it was misleading or maybe knew it was not right, versus mistaken reports being sent out that just hadn't been checked, which is obviously an error and omission. So something that we need to keep an eye on. And no doubt that will change. Insurers will start to have to adapt and evolve with AI in how they actually start to build those types of those endorsements and clauses into their policy wording. So every business will need to keep their finger on the pulse with that, with their insurance advisor, around how they are best to navigate that world when the time comes. So we have been asked in multiple interviews, whether it's the AICD or we've done a few TV interviews around, should there be a blanket ban? Should there be more regulation to manage these risks? So after a lot of discussions on this, blanket bans won't be the answer. I think obviously that's pretty clear cut for everybody who's using it. It does speed up efficiencies. It does provide better ROI in certain circumstances. So a blanket ban simply won't, in my opinion, be the answer. However, correct risk management and peer reviewing processes in the immediate future will help around how the AI is used and for what tasks that you guys are using it for. Now, ChatGPT does have the potential to transform businesses by automating SEO language-based tasks, as I said, efficiencies, with unprecedented speed and efficiencies, and we just can't ignore that. So a blanket ban, again, just is something that we shouldn't be looking to. So when we refer to advice-based businesses, there will likely need to be reviews on how this can be managed sensibly rather than a blanket ban, as it is a tool which will certainly help all of us that are in professional advice-based firms, just for this topic of conversation, for what I do, with business efficiencies. We can now obviously run annual reports. I manage a number of ASX companies. When I'm doing financial analysis of those companies, I can now start to build out those ratios a lot quicker than spending a calculator and spending 3 or 4 hours on it. It means I can get a few more done each week. So those boards, as I said before, cyber liability, AI, parallels. Now, when we look at regulations and those regulators looking to start to scrutinise this particular technology closer in the future, they will look to boards. They will look to governance, risk and compliance. So like cyber, boards will need to get their heads around how AI is being used within their business, because at the end of the day, your fiduciary duties as a director will start to incorporate best practice and how you run the business effectively and safely. So how boards can prepare. So if your organisation is not yet consciously adopting AI, it may be missing out, obviously, on those business improvement opportunities. So Australia has historically played catch up on AI and cyber, and ultimately, many organisations will need to be ready for AI. And from a risk management perspective, in all probability, AI is all likely already being used in many organisations without official policies, and the insurance industry is certainly aware of that. If we look at Samsung, they found valuable IP had leaked when an employee used ChatGPT to help write minutes of a meeting, for example. So again, looping back to the inputs. So our first step is to map usage as an extension of risk management practices. Is AI covered by existing compliance programs? Now, the use of AI is already covered by the general law. For example, the Corporations Act requires servicing a global market will need to have regard to local requirements such as the European Union's GDPR, the forthcoming EU AI Act, and laws in a number of US states, including California's Consumer Privacy Act. So in summary, the use of AI does not expand the scope of directors' duties. If we're looking back to the governance and board responsibilities and how that sort of is going to be the top directive from the top down to all these professional services firms and wider businesses. But it forces directors and professionals to think differently about the risks that may arise. Now, if you are a director, ultimately, you bear responsibility for the implementation of AI within a business. They and you have an obligation to assess the benefits of using AI systems and to consider what new liabilities may arise as a result. Now, directors are also ultimately responsible for ensuring compliance with laws and regulations, as well as whether the AI technology is being used in a responsible manner. So, for example, a failure to implement and or control adequate security measures for the business's own IT systems or its cloud service providers that leads to a hack may lead to financial loss and reputational damages to a business. This will translate and have parallels to AI. We've already seen it happen with cyber. No problem. Boards will now need to start to adopt this, and they'll need to adopt it fast. So just to wrap it up, questions to consider that we've been talking to our clients about. How can you ensure generative AI applications are managed effectively to avoid financial penalty due to not complying with regulations? How can you proactively manage your applications and be aware of watching for potential bias or discrimination? And are you using generative AI applications in line with your ethics, values, and brand? Now, I know that's probably a little bit muddly all over this presentation to a degree, but that's because we're in such an immature phase of the insurance industries and how AI is being adopted and what risks apply and how is insurance being applied to cover those types of risks. And that is something that we're navigating through at the moment. But these are the topics and the questions that we're having discussions with our clients on and raising awareness. Professional indemnity, professional services, how is risk being managed around AI within the business, and how are boards addressing these risk management procedures internally like they have with cyber. I'll leave it there, but obviously if there are any questions, please feel free to shoot them across, or if we've run out of time, I think my details might be passed around. You're more than welcome to get in touch with me and we can take that offline.